bankruptcy is the engine of economic growth.
There's like an atmosphere in Japan that you shouldn't fail.
Some individuals working in very big companies can do nothing new and never fail. But what are they contributing to the company? The question is whether or not we learn more than we would have done if we had stayed the same. When the world is changing, that attitude to failure is going to be crucial for those big companies driving change in the future.
クロスディグワンオンワン始まります。今日のテーマは失敗の科学です。クロスディグ見てる方もですね、なんでこんなミスを犯すんだっていう結構いろいろ毎日思うと思うんですが、実は優秀な人ももうミスを犯すと。で、こういう失敗の科学っていう本が出てですね、これすごいんですよ。もう日本で10年近く売れていまして、もうベストセラーと。で、糸井重里さんとか、海外でもダニエル・ピンクさんとかですね、バージングループの会長とか、ダイソンの創業者ももう絶賛している本です。この本を読むとですね、人間は失敗するんだと。専門家でも失敗すると。ただそれをちゃんと受け入れて、そこから学ぶってことが大事だってこと、いろんな事例ともに書かれています。今日はこの著者のマシュー・サイドさんにイギリスからお越しいただいて、この本を徹底的に深掘りして、私たちも失敗からどう学べばいいのかっていうことを深掘りしていきたいと思います。では早速ご紹介しましょう。So, Matthew Side, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here. Looking forward to our conversation very much.
So I just explained to our audience that your book, also in Japan, Black Box Thinking is a bestseller. So it's a worldwide bestseller. Why do you think it's a bestseller globally?
Well, it's great to be here. Great to hear that.
Yeah.
And I think the theme that I try and discuss in the book is about failure, and in particular our attitude to failure. And of course, before becoming a writer, I was a sports person.
You're a table tennis player.
I was a table tennis player. Sometimes this is called ping pong.
Yes.
And this makes it sound like a very small game, but of course, around the world, it's quite a tough game to get to the top. And in sport, of course, you don't want to fail.
No.
You don't want to lose. You don't want to make mistakes. But in order to grow in sport, in life, in business, particularly in the space of innovation and science, we have to sometimes fail. We have to test ourselves. We have to be willing to place ourselves outside the comfort zone. And then the question is often, how do we respond to failure?
Right.
Do we take it as a learning opportunity? Do we see it as a way of growing and developing our understanding of the world and the evolution of our skill? Or do we find it embarrassing or stigmatizing is the word we use in English? And then it can be very dangerous and very destructive.
So in Japan, failure is tend to be a bad thing. And I have like a lot of studies that say that almost 70% of young people in Japan don't want to fail. Do you think it's a global issue, or do you think there's some cultural aspect to it?
Well, I think it's worth understanding why. Sometimes it can be rational, can it not, to worry about failure? If, for example, I'm a pilot.
Yes.
And I'm coming in, as I did the day before yesterday.
You arrived yesterday, yes.
Into Tokyo
from London.
On the final approach. And the pilot says, okay, I'm going to try something new today. I'm going to try
don't.
I'm going to try and innovate.
Okay.
And because they try something new, the plane crashes and hundreds of people die. We would not say to the pilot, well done.
No.
This was wonderful innovation.
Learn from failure. No.
Yeah, we would probably say to the pilot, we're going to put you on trial for mass murder.
Right.
So I think it's worth saying failure is not always good. However, if a pilot had an idea, maybe I could change something and make the plane safer. Where would we want the pilot to test the hypothesis? Would we want the pilot to test it in midair with many lives on it? No, we'd want to test it in a simulator. There you get the benefits of learning. You can fail, nobody dies, and yet you can take what you learn into the real world. And I think whenever we conceptualize failure, we are trying to trade off the benefits of learning from mistakes against the inevitable downside risks. And we have to do that in a strategic way.
Right.
And I think that's what characterizes the companies, the civilizations that harness failure effectively and those which do not. It's important to have a strategic lens. And I think for young people worrying about failure, try and fail in places where the consequences are less significant. And then when you take your learning into the real world, you're less likely to fail.
So when you say learn from failure, the matter is that when you fail, because like the example you gave us, if you fail when you're on a plane, there will be a big consequence. But if you fail on like a simulator, there will be a good opportunity to learn. So it's a matter of when you fail.
Yes, and if you think of, for example, a retail company, and the person in marketing has an idea. Maybe if we change the shelves and the order of the products, it will help the business. Would they test this in every store and bet the equity of the whole business? No, maybe try it in a pilot scheme.
Right.
That way you can test whether or not the assumption is true before you roll it out. But many people who are scared of failure, they do the pilot scheme in the best conditions, with the best manager, the best customers, but they're not learning anything. Why not test it in challenging circumstances? That way you get more learning, and then when you scale it, you get a bigger result. And so I think a healthy attitude to failure when it comes to testing hypothesis helps you to do things better in the future. And I think perhaps it's worth thinking of one of the most successful institutions we have, science. If you perform an experiment and you know the result before you conduct it, it is not an experiment. An experiment by definition has to have a risk of failure because you're trying to discover new knowledge. So in R&D, innovation, entrepreneurism, even in the real world, you have to take some risks in order to figure out how to do things better. Ryan, you're probably familiar with the phrase in Silicon Valley, fail fast.
Yes, they always say that.
But they're not failing randomly. They're testing propositions, prototypes, minimum viable products strategically. So with every single attempt, they're learning more so they can take the learning into the future. That, I think, is where greatness can happen.
How about yourself? So before you became a writer columnist, you were a ping pong player. So
That's
did
right.
you fail not during championships, but during practice?
Yes. So in sport, there are two environments. One, the training hall, and then the competition hall.
Yes.
In the training hall, the most important thing is to try activities which are stretching you. So you're playing against a very good player or a coach who has a bucket of balls, backhand, forehand, backhand. So you're failing a lot because they're stretching your capabilities. But with each failure, it's showing you what you need to do differently to bridge the gap between what you can do now and what you could do with your full potential. So practice is a way of failing intelligently. If you only do things you can already do very easily, yes, you can become more consistent, but you don't expand the array of capacities. When I was in my late teens, one of the best players in the world, somebody called Chen Xinhua, he was Chinese, very, very
Famous,
good player.
yes.
And he married an English woman. So he came to England and he watched how I was practicing. And he said, no. It's too easy. You're getting every ball on the table. I'm going to train with you so that you're making more mistakes, more failures. Why? So when you play the big match, you have a higher skill level and you're more likely to win.
So we're here at TBS. It's a big company in Japan. So in Japan, a lot of large corporations, there are people who are good at avoiding failure. So which do you think which person will succeed in the future? A person who can avoid failure or people who fail fast and learn from those mistakes?
I want you to imagine the history of science if no scientist wished to fail ever. How could science have progressed?
That's true.
Science is about testing hypotheses, and when the hypothesis does not work, we learn.
Yes.
And it sets the stage for a new hypothesis. This is what progress means in science. Imagine capitalism, free market. No entrepreneur wishes to fail.
No.
But then they try nothing. Because in order to start a new business, there's always a risk. Sometimes called the customer proposition or the value proposition. Will people like this product? I have to persuade an investor to put their money in, but maybe it will not work as well as we hoped. So we have to make changes. Bankruptcy is the engine of economic growth. This sounds strange, perhaps.
A little strange, yeah, because bankruptcy seems failure and stops growth.
Right. But failure shows the system what doesn't work. Think about for a moment evolution. We are complex organisms. But the only way you go from simple to complex is through natural selection.
Yes.
Some fail, some succeed, but this enables cumulatively the system to become more complex and humans to become more intelligent and more capable. It's the same in free market economics. If there are no failures, think about the Soviet Union. You're probably too young to think back to this period.
Well, I read in history books, yes.
Right, so before 1990, this system, there were no failures. The state, the government decided how things were produced, and if the producer, the company, was not doing well, they would provide more subsidy. Nothing changed. It became a very poor society.
Right.
It stagnated. The beauty of capitalism is trying different things. What works? What doesn't? What doesn't work? This is a bankruptcy, but it shows us a signpost to what does work. And so it's true that some individuals working in very big companies can do nothing new and never fail. But what are they contributing to the company? What value are they adding? They're just doing what has always been done. In a world that is changing, that's a recipe for falling behind because we have to connect our knowledge with new insights, new technologies. And when doing this, there's always going to be a risk.
Right.
The question is whether or not we learn more than we would have done if we had stayed the same. So I think that attitude to failure is going to be crucial for those big companies driving change in the future.
So do you think it's important to accept failure as an organization, or do you think each individual should fail?
It varies a little bit. So if for example, it's a car company, and we have a design of car, and we want to produce it consistently. If one of the components is the wrong size, the machine won't work. So we want to take the failures out with lean manufacturing or Six Sigma statistical analysis. We're trying to squeeze out the variance so we can deliver a consistent product in a consistent way. Fantastic. But at some point, we want to create a new kind of car. We want to move from an internal combustion engine to an EV. We learn more about consumer psychology. We want to change the interior of the car. Then you need to try new things. If you're working in a consistent environment, you take away the failure. But would you agree? But there has to be bandwidth for how do we do things differently and better. That is where it becomes very important to have this open learning mindset to failure.
To create an organization like an open mindset to failure, do you think it's the role of the leadership, or who should be responsible for creating such an organization?
What I have learned since writing the book is leaders are very, very important.
So what should the leader say to the person who failed?
So I think a little bit of subtlety. If a patient in a hospital dies because of a medical error, the question is, why did the error happen? Sometimes we talk about a root cause analysis. Often it's because maybe the labeling was confusing on the medication. We have to change the labeling to make it easier for the professionals. But if you blame immediately the professional and not the other aspects of a complex system, it can create a cover-up culture. One of the most interesting moments in the early history of aviation, in the 1950s, Boeing B-17s were crashing. And it seemed strange. These are quite well-designed aircraft. And it turned out they did a root cause analysis, and the lever linked to the wheels and the lever linked to the flaps were the same. They looked the same, and they were next to each other on the dashboard. So you've got a difficult landing, lots of things happening at the same time. Even talented pilots were inadvertently pulling the wrong switch. So this was an ergonomic design flaw. Having figured out what went wrong, they put a small wheel on one of the levers and a small flap on the other. And accidents disappeared overnight. And it was a very important moment in the early development of industrial ergonomics. But I want you to imagine, Ryan, what if they had not done a root cause analysis? They're pulling the wrong switch. Why are they pulling the wrong switch? It's gross negligence. We've trained them. There was probably a sign up in the cockpit saying, don't press the wrong switch, but they're still to sack them or even put them on trial. It looks like decisive management, and yet it's sending a signal to every pilot, never share mistakes. And you create a cover-up culture. And of course, the ergonomic flaw would still have been there. So I think you need people to be open and honest about mistakes. And you shouldn't blame preemptively. Only blame after the root cause. If after a root cause analysis, there's nothing wrong with the system, it's the pilot who made the mistake, okay, maybe a bit of extra training and help. But if they make the same mistake, then of course there should be consequences. Or if a pilot drinks alcohol, then you must.
Right.
I don't like this phrase, no blame culture. This is not a good idea. Sometimes blame is appropriate. But if you blame only after looking deeper into the reasons, you can have openness and accountability. And this is what aviation does very well today. All around the world, there are near misses. The pilots openly report very big data. It means you can make changes to prevent an accident before it's even happened. And every commercial aircraft has, you've heard of a black box?
Black box, yes.
The book is named after this. So when there is a crash, the investigation branch can look at the data and the voice recorder, figure out what went wrong, put reformers in place to ensure the same mistake never happens again. That's a great system of learning plus accountability.
So in your book, you illustrate a lot of real-life examples. And there's an example of aviation and also medical errors. So what's the difference between aviation and medical errors?
Aviation, they learn. The culture is about learning. About every mistake, every near miss, part of the journey to cut the accident rate to as low a level as possible. In healthcare, in my country, perhaps here too, they have a different culture. People who make mistakes, doctors, nurses, are often punished. They don't report their mistakes. It means the same mistake happens again and again. In America, I think I say in the book, avoidable medical error is one of the biggest killers. And I think it's going to take a real shift in mentality to get closer to what they have, this very precious culture in aviation.
In Japan, doctors are like elites, they're like high professionals, so it's very difficult in Japan to blame them or even doubt them that they are making mistakes. In your book, you also mentioned that some nurse, they kind of realized the mistake, but they didn't have the voice to speak out. Do you think that's the same around the world?
Yeah, I think this can be a problem. We sometimes talk about the hierarchy gradient. Now, I think it's worth saying, Ryan, that hierarchies are very important. If you have a completely flat team or organization, we know from the evidence that they're not effective.
It doesn't work.
Because it doesn't work. Why? Because no one knows who's in charge and nothing gets done.
No.
But if there is a complex situation, aviation, healthcare, business, it's very unlikely that any one person has all of the good ideas. Because it's too much for any one person to understand.
It's such a complicated world, especially these days. Yeah.
Exactly. The more complex the environment, the less likely that any one person will have a monopoly of good insights. Even the leader, even the CEO, even the surgeon, even the Prime Minister. What you need there is effective teams. You bring people together with different bits of knowledge. Why are all the big decisions taken in teams now? Too complex. But if in the team, people are worried about saying anything that diverges from the leader, so much respect for the leader, it means there's only one brain in the team. And that means the organization is going to be ineffective. The leader, to run an effective hierarchy today, needs to hear different points of view, where people are offering information that maybe contradicts what they think. We test each other's ideas verbally. Meetings are really a kind of hypothesis testing between different individuals. You offer an idea, I say it wouldn't work because of this, and we discuss. I'm not criticizing you. I'm testing your idea. The most value I can bring to an idea is to test it respectfully. Leaders who can create a culture where people in the meeting, on Zoom, in the physical room, on the corridor, in the elevator, they're creating a meritocracy of ideas. In the end, the leader has to decide.
Right.
This is very important.
Yes.
But the leader makes significantly better judgments when they have access to information they were unaware of. I think leaders who can show humility when discussing, evaluating, can also show conviction when operationalizing. This, I think, is what the great leaders look like today. Not just in Silicon Valley, not just in the innovation space, but almost any context. Humility when evaluating, conviction when getting things done.
You made a big point because in Japan, especially traditional companies, CEOs listen too much to peers. What's the difference between listening to people, listening to risks, and actually making a decision? Because there are risks to every decision.
Well, that's very interesting because there's a risk we haven't talked about, which is being too slow.
That's right.
Sometimes it's worse to be slow than wrong. These discussions have to have a time element.
Time.
Because we are judged not on our evaluations, but on our actions.
Yes.
And in a time-sensitive environment, waiting too long for consensus is not going to work. And we have to have a time limit for the discussion, for the evaluation. That way you can be fast. If there's no discussion, of course, and the leader you can be fast and wrong.
Right.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
In fact, I don't know if you're a fan of Elon Musk, but he's an interesting character.
Complicated.
I think it's complicated.
Yes.
But he made a very good point about leaders who don't listen and just act. He said it's no good digging fast if you're digging your own grave.
Interesting.
And you want to really listen, but in a time-sensitive way so you can then act. On consensus, there's a phrase sometimes, a camel is a horse designed by committee. This is where every point of view becomes part of the final solution. This is, I don't think, a smart way to go. We don't want to have a consensus. Some people will disagree. When you have a different strategy and you have 5 different ideas, you try and pull them together, you have often incoherence. The point of the meeting is to test each other's ideas to get the best one. Some will disagree. Some will disagree. This is what Jeff Bezos meant when he said dissent when evaluating, but after, when the leader has set the direction, even if you disagree, you must commit. Being able to dissent and commit. I think is part of the parcel of great decision making.
Great point. Let's talk about young people in Japan because there's a study by Dentsu. Almost 70% of high school students, university students, young people, they're basically afraid of failure. And they do analysis and they say that there's like a constant psychological state of having only one life left. It's like a video game, you know, there's just one remaining life. So it's like standing on the edge of a cliff. So do you have any advice for the young people in Japan?
Thank you. That's very interesting. And the video game analogy is intriguing in many ways. We had the same thing in the UK, maybe a different phrase, but because of social media, people were sharing their lives.
Yes.
But often they were making their lives look really quite wonderful.
Yes, on Instagram and everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the meals look good, the holidays look good. And if the picture didn't look good, they would change it a little bit. And it made young people think that life is about looking and acting perfectly.
True.
I think this can be devastating. Because if one thinks that life is about being perfect, why would you ever take a risk? Why in class at school would you say, I didn't understand? Could you explain again to the teacher? It means you are less than perfect. You are ignorant. But by not asking, you perpetuate your ignorance. Life is an adventure. Failing is part of the greatness of the adventure. Because when the world is changing and changing fast, that willingness to try things, to fail, and to learn is part of what brings the joy of life. Maybe not easy in some cultures to get to that place, but I remember, Ryan, I went to a school in the north of England, and I was opening a new room in the school, a new hall.
A new hall.
And there were some very eminent people. The mayor was there, the local politician, the member of parliament. And there was a girl who was doing a performance where she had a baton and was throwing and catching, and it was beautiful. And I sensed in the room, everyone was looking, thinking, what if she drops it? What if she drops it? And of course, because of this atmosphere of fear, she dropped it. And I gave a small speech. And I said, the best thing that happened to me in my life was similar age to the girl. I was in the school play. And I had one line. It was a play called Joseph, a musical, Joseph in his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I saw my mum and dad and the other parents from behind the curtain. And I went to say the line. I was a little bit nervous, and I made a mistake. And I thought, what will my father say? Will he be upset? And he came to me and he hugged me. He said, the worst thing in life is not to try, but to fail to try. You'll learn from this. And it's been the same throughout my life. When I make mistakes, the Olympic Games, or giving a big talk, that's where you learn. It's not the end of the world, and never see it as such.
I'm glad you mentioned atmosphere, because in Japan, there's a Japanese phrase called 空気を読む. It literally means read the air. So in Japanese organizations, it's not the CEOs or the leaders that force people not to fail. It's like the atmosphere around it. There's like an atmosphere in Japan that you shouldn't fail. How can you change that?
You know, when I was coming to the end of my ping pong career, I'm still the number one in the UK, but my world ranking is starting to fall. And I started writing. I was very lucky. I phoned, cold called the Times newspaper. And I said, might it be possible to occasionally write article in the Times before the Olympic Games in Sydney? They said, okay, we take a look. And I sent many. None got published. And then eventually one got published. I was like, wow, I'm in the Times. And I went and bought 20 copies. It was a big broadsheet back then.
Did you give it away to all your friends?
I did. I gave it to some of my best friends.
Okay.
But an unintended side effect is I got a call out of the blue from Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs?
And they said, we read your article. Would you come and give a talk to our top traders from around the world at our conferencing suite in London? And I'm a ping pong player giving a talk to these investment banks. So I don't know if you've heard the phrase imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes.
I had this imposter syndrome, and I'm reading the air. And I can see, do they think I'm good enough to be here? And I was very nervous. I had not done very much public speaking before. So I wrote the speech, and I'm reading it, but I'm losing the room. And maybe 10 minutes before the end, somebody heckled. And I remember Ryan leaving thinking that was a terrible failure. And I'm never, ever going to take the opportunity to give a talk again because I don't have but then I thought, no, maybe I can improve at this. Maybe that failure is showing me that I need to, rather than reading the speech, so I Googled public speaking practice. And the first hit was an organization called Toastmasters. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
It's a global network of public speaking clubs.
Wow, okay.
And the nearest one to me was just where I live in southwest London. And you go, and there are 10 or 15 people in a room that they had rented every second Wednesday. And if you're lucky to get on the program, you give a talk. And so you're learning. You read the air, and of course, there's pressure, and you don't want to fail. But you begin, Ryan, to develop techniques for helping you to cope with the stress, the fear of failure. And then there's spontaneous speaking, where you have to walk to the front, you get a card, you look, and you have to immediately, and it's very terrifying. But over time, you begin to change the air in the room. You begin to change the atmosphere. You get up, and people can sense, maybe they're not so scared. They relax. And, we're giving an interview here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras. And lights and makeup. If I had studio, great journalist. If I had done this, Ryan, 25 years ago, I would have been so nervous.
You'll be reading the script.
I'll be reading the script. But if you try, and I failed many times at Toastmasters. Many, many times. I went every second Wednesday for 4 or 5 years. Slowly, you get better.
4 or 5 years, wow.
Because I knew I wanted to be somebody who was a journalist. I wanted to be able to talk about my ideas, to think on my feet, to be able to engage, to hold a room. And I'm not the best communicator, but you know what this mindset gives you? The opportunity to be the best you can be. And you see those failures as stepping stones for your destination.
So after you gave your speech, the first speech to Goldman Sachs, you Google it and you went to this school. What's the difference between a person who will stop giving a speech, but a person who will Google it?
This is the whole thing. If you think that being a good speaker is about having the gift, the talent.
You should be like born to be a good speaker.
Natural speaker.
Natural speaker, yeah.
Any failure is evidence you don't have the gift. Might as well give up. If you see the ability to speak well as something you can develop, then the failures are part of learning. Sometimes the first mindset is called a fixed mindset. The other one is called a growth mindset. This growth mindset is very significant, I think, in helping us to see failure not as a stigmatizing thing, but as a pathway to where we want to get to. And I remember speaking to the head of HR at Goldman Sachs many years later. They said, we hire very talented people. And sometimes we put them in a new situation, like a beauty parade to a customer. They're going to give a pitch.
Yes.
And of course, the first time they do it, they're not perfect. That's why they're given the opportunity. It's often a low stakes environment. But she said you have 2 different responses. Some are so fearful that they failed that they go through the rest of their careers using highly sophisticated avoidance strategies never to fail again. But they never grow. Remember you asked me earlier, do we want people in organizations who never fail?
Avoid fail.
What on earth are these people adding to Goldman Sachs? Whereas others, they're like, okay, that was tough, but I can learn to be better. And they'll reach out to somebody who's very good at giving pitches. And they'll say, do you mind if I watch you? Can you give me some feedback the next time I'm doing it? Maybe they even videotape it so that they can work with them. But can you see the willingness to try new things is presupposed by the prior belief in one's capacity to learn. That's where the growth mindset is so powerful.
So we now have ChatGPT, so there's an AI who maybe never fails. Do you think AI will change the way we fail?
Well, I think there's a short and long-term question. I don't know how you feel about it, Ryan, but I think ChatGPT is an extraordinary technology. I think AI is remarkable.
Yes.
I think it is a transformative technology. But there is one place where humans are still more capable than the LLMs and AI more generally. One of the great innovators in AI is a British person called Demis Hassabis. He is the founder and chief executive of DeepMind.
Yes.
It's a Google subsidiary
Right.
now. He won the Nobel Prize
yeah.
for chemistry.
For chemistry, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
Protein folding.
Protein, yes.
AlphaFold. And he was interviewed 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm hoping to meet him myself soon. He said, LLMs, AI are very good at testing hypotheses, about searching for data. But the quality of the answers depend on the quality of the questions.
That's right. Yeah.
Who's asking the questions? Asking intelligent questions is a very distinctive human skill where the growth mindset is very important. If you think about Einstein asked a very strange question in the early part of the 20th century. Would light from a distant star be bent by the gravitational pull of an intermediate star? This is the theory of relativity. And Eddington went to the equator to test this conjecture. What an amazing conjecture. The theory of relativity. And he came up with this theory with a thought experiment running away from a clock at the speed of light. This thought experiment and others came up with an interesting question or conjecture. Hassabis, who's a great optimist about AI, says AI is nowhere near capable of asking questions, posing conjectures in the way that humans can. Moreover, they don't yet know the mechanism through which because we reason humans by analogy.
Yeah.
We use metaphor. We use thought experiments. This is going to be a very, very important part of how we interact with AIs. And to do that effectively, we're going to need to fail. Ask questions that don't work as we get to better, more fruitful questions.
Thank you. So, Matthew, we need to wrap up. So I highly recommend this book to our audience. And please subscribe to our channel. So any final comments, final words for our audience?
Well, look, Ryan, I wanted to say feedback for you. You did a terrific job.
Did I ask the right questions?
Well, do you know,
am I better than AI?
Well, first of all, you're definitely better than AI.
Okay.
And I've enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thank you for making it so easy for me. Thank you for reading the book and asking penetrating questions.
It's a wonderful book.
But if I may say so, it's interesting to me the questions you asked. And the young people, I want to say particularly out there, I know what it feels like when the air is one of tension and anxiety. What if it goes wrong? Trying to break through that isn't just how you grow, it's so much more enjoyable, life itself.
Thank you, Matthew. I really learned so much from this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan.